The message arrived on every human screen at exactly the same moment. From Earth to the furthest colony at the edge of explored space, 12 billion humans stopped what they were doing and watched. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Earthborn, floating in orbit above Mars. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent 40 years in the military, fighting pirates and rebels, but he had never seen anything like this. On the main screen, a creature appeared. It looked like a mix between a lizard and a bird, with blue scales and 4 eyes. This was Counselor, leader of the Empire and the most powerful voice in the Galactic Council. Humans of Earth and her colonies began. His voice was translated by machines, but the anger came through clearly. The Galactic Council has reached its decision. Your species has existed in galactic space for only 200 years. In that short time, you have claimed 73 worlds. You have refused to follow Council laws. You have rejected our authority. This cannot continue. Watched without moving. Around him, his crew stayed silent. The Council gives you this final chance, continued. You will abandon all colony worlds. You will return to your home system. You will pay reparations of 10 trillion galactic credits. You will accept Council military forces on Earth and all your stations. If you refuse, we will consider it an act of war. You have 30 days to answer. The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody on the bridge spoke. Then Lieutenant, a young woman with sharp eyes, turned to, Admiral, what are our orders? Looked at his crew. Send the message to command, then we wait. Light years away, on the Council station that floated between galaxies, Ambassador sat in the observation chamber. She was a small woman with gray hair tied in a simple knot. She wore the blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. She had been Earth's voice to the galaxy for 15 years. The 12 Council members sat in their seats, arranged in a circle around her. They looked like creatures from nightmares and dreams. Some had tentacles, some had wings, some looked almost human, but all of them watched her with the same expression. They expected fear. They expected begging. Stood up slowly. She looked at each Council member in turn. Then she reached up and touched the communication device on her collar. With one quick motion, she switched it off. The Council members leaned forward. What was she doing? Walked to the door. She didn't run, she didn't hurry. She just walked, as calm as someone leaving a boring meeting. The door opened and she stepped through. She never looked back. Counselor, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish, turned too. What just happened? She disconnected, said. He sounded confused. She simply left. Try to contact their government, another counselor suggested. They tried. Every communication channel to Earth went silent, not destroyed, not blocked, just silent, as if someone had simply turned off every radio, every transmitter, every relay station at the same moment. On the human colony world of New Haven, people walked out of their homes and looked at the sky. The message from the Council had reached them too. Governor, a former merchant who had helped build this world, stood in the central plaza. What do we do? Someone asked him. Smiled. It was a strange smile, like he knew a secret. We wait, trust Earth, trust command. But they threatened war. Yes, said quietly, they did. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in a facility that didn't appear on any map, Dr. Sora watched screens filled with numbers and graphs. She was a small woman who looked too young to be in charge of anything important. But she was the head of Project Whisper, humanity's most secret research program. It's working, she said softly. The signal is spreading. Colonel stood beside her. He was a big man with scars on his hands from old fights. He ran Earth's psychological warfare division, though most people didn't know such a division existed. How long until full coverage? 3 hours, Dr. Sora replied. Every human colony, every ship, every station. The network is complete. And they won't detect it. Dr. Sora shook her head. They don't even know what to look for. To them, it will just look like we went quiet. On the far side of human space, Captain floated in zero gravity on the bridge of his ship, the Silent Echo. His ship was a stealth frigate, painted black and covered with materials that absorbed every type of scan the Council used. He and his crew had been here for 6 months, watching a Council military base. The Council didn't know they were here. The Council didn't even know this ship existed. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving the signal from Earth." Nodded, acknowledged. "Begin radio silence protocol. All hands, from this moment we don't exist." The ship went dark. Every transmission stopped. Even the small heat signatures that all ships produced seemed to fade away. The Silent Echo became a ghost, floating in the darkness of space. Back on the Council station, panic was starting to spread. "They're not responding to anything," one counselor said. "Have they mobilized their fleet?" another asked. "No, that's the strange part. Their ships are still in normal positions, but we can't intercept any communications. It's like every human suddenly forgot how to use a radio." Slammed his claw on the table. "This is a trick. They're trying to buy time." "Time for what?" Counselor asked. "They must know they cannot win a war against us. The Council has 1,000 ships for every one of theirs." "Perhaps they're surrendering," someone suggested. "Perhaps the silence means they accept our terms." "Then where is the formal surrender?" demanded. "Where are their diplomats? Where are their messages?" Nobody had an answer. Admiral stood at the window of his ship looking down at Mars. The red planet turned slowly beneath him. He thought about the message from Earth Command. It had been short. Just 3 words: begin the silence. He thought about his career, all those years of training, all those battle simulations, all that preparation for war. And now, when war had finally come, Earth's orders were simple: say nothing, do nothing, just wait. It felt wrong. Every military instinct told him to act, to prepare, to fight. But had learned to trust Earth Command. They had never led him wrong before. "All ships," he said quietly, "maintain position. Radio silence protocols in effect. No transmissions of any kind." "Sir, what if the Council attacks?" Turned to look at his crew. "Then we still say nothing." Across human space, 12 billion people went about their lives. They went to work. They ate dinner. They talked to their families. But not a single radio signal left human space. Not one message, not one transmission, not even an automatic beacon. The humans had received a declaration of war. And they had answered with silence. In her small apartment on Earth, Ambassador sat by the window and drank tea. She looked peaceful. On her table lay her diplomatic credentials, her communication devices, her official seals. She wouldn't need them for a while. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky turned orange and red, smiled. The Council had made their move. Now it was humanity's turn, but the Council didn't understand yet. They thought silence meant fear. They thought silence meant weakness. They had no idea what silence really meant. Not yet. But they would learn. 3 weeks had passed since the Council's ultimatum. 3 weeks of absolute silence from human space. Counselor stood before the Council assembly, his blue scales darker than usual. "Our intelligence networks have detected no military buildup, no fleet movements, no emergency broadcasts. The human colonies are operating on minimal power only." "They're paralyzed with fear," one counselor said confidently. "They know they cannot win." "Then why haven't they surrendered?" Counselor asked. The jellyfish-like creature pulsed with nervous light. "Pride," declared. "But pride will not save them. Commander, report on your fleet's position." A military commander stepped forward. He looked similar to, but was larger and covered in battle scars. "My forces are ready. 500 ships positioned at the edge of human space. We await your order to advance." "Then advance," said. "Occupy their colonies. Show them that silence will not save them from the Council's judgment." The fleet moved forward, massive ships that could destroy planets if needed. Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the screens as they approached the first human colony, New Haven. "Any response from the colony?" he asked. "No, sir, all quiet. Wait." The sensor officer looked confused. "Sir, the colony is dark." "Dark?" "Most of the power grid is offline. Only minimal life support. No defenses active. No shields. It's like they're not even trying to protect themselves." Felt something strange in his chest. Uncertainty. Could it be a trap? Scans show normal population levels. People are moving around in the cities, but no military response at all. "Take us down," ordered. "Landing teams prepare to occupy the capital city." The ships descended through New Haven's atmosphere. The colony was built in a wide valley with a city that housed 500,000 humans. Usually, cities this size blazed with lights and energy. But now, as the council ships approached, the city was almost dark. Only small fires and candles provided light. The landing craft touched down in the central plaza. Soldiers poured out, weapons ready. They expected fighting. They expected resistance. Instead, they found people walking through the streets as if nothing was happening. A soldier approached a human merchant. The merchant was governor, though the soldier didn't know this, was setting up a small stand selling vegetables. "You," the soldier shouted, "your world is now under council occupation. Acknowledge your surrender." Continued arranging his vegetables. He didn't look at the soldier. He didn't respond. It was as if the soldier didn't exist. The soldier moved closer. "I am speaking to you. Respond." Nothing. Picked up a vegetable, examined it, and placed it carefully on the stand. His movements were calm and deliberate, not defiant, not scared, just present but somewhere else at the same time. Other soldiers tried with other humans. Every time the same response. The humans went about their daily tasks. They walked to work. They cooked food. They talked to each other. But they never acknowledged the council forces. Not with words, not with looks, not even with fear. "It's like we're ghosts," one soldier said to his commander. "Like they can't see us at all." The same scene repeated on colony after colony. The council forces landed, expecting battles or surrenders. Instead, they found humans living in near darkness, going about their lives in perfect silence, treating the occupiers as if they simply weren't there. On Earth, deep in the hidden facility, Dr. Sora monitored her screens with satisfaction. "The null field is working perfectly," she said. "Every human is maintaining the mental discipline. The synchronized silence is creating quantum interference on levels the Council's sensors can't detect." Colonel watched as more reports came in from the colonies, and the psychological effect. Better than predicted. Council soldiers are reporting confusion, disorientation, and feelings of unreality. Their neural patterns are compatible with our brain waves, which means they're vulnerable to the field. They came expecting conflict. Silence is breaking them. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, merchant ships continued moving through space. One of these ships was the Morning Star, captained by a man named Cousin. The ship appeared to be carrying standard goods: food, medicine, basic supplies. Council patrol ships stopped him at regular intervals. "State your purpose," a council officer would demand. Would hand over his manifests. Everything looked normal: legal trade routes, proper documentation. The council would scan his ship, find nothing unusual, and let him pass. What they didn't know was that hidden in the ship's hull, in spaces too small for standard sensors to detect, were pieces of what Dr. Sara called the resonance network. Each piece was no larger than a coin. Would drop them at specific coordinates as he traveled. They would float in space, waiting. Other merchant ships did the same. Hundreds of ships, thousands of small devices, slowly spreading throughout council space like invisible seeds. Back on the council station, the ruling members gathered in emergency session. "This is madness," one counselor shouted. "Our soldiers are requesting to be pulled off human worlds. They say they can't function properly." "They're weak," snapped. "Humans are doing nothing. They're just sitting there in the dark like frightened children." "Then why are our soldiers afraid?" Counselor asked quietly. That question hung in the air. Nobody had a good answer. Commander sent a report from New Haven. His voice sounded strained. "Council members, I must inform you of unusual developments. My soldiers are experiencing what they describe as the void. They report feeling watched even when no humans are present. They forget orders. They have difficulty coordinating with each other. Equipment malfunctions more frequently than normal." "You're telling us that well-trained soldiers are being defeated by silence," said with disgust. "I'm telling you that something is happening here that we don't understand," replied. "I request permission to withdraw my forces until we can analyze the situation." "Permission, you will maintain the occupation." But was right to be concerned. On New Haven and the other occupied colonies, something strange was happening. Council soldiers would enter a building and forget why they came. They would try to give orders but couldn't remember what orders to give. They would look at each other and feel like they were looking at strangers. One soldier tried to explain it to his commander. "Sir, it's like, have you ever repeated a word so many times that it stops meaning anything? That's what this feels like. We're here, but the longer we stay, the less real we feel. And the humans just keep being silent, just keep ignoring us, and somehow that makes it worse." In space, Captain watched from the silent echo as Council ships passed nearby. His ship was positioned near a major Council military base. He had been here for months, completely undetected. Now he watched as those ships behaved strangely. They would break formation without reason. They would take longer than normal to respond to commands from their base. Small errors, little mistakes, but they were adding up. "Lieutenant," said quietly, "are you recording this?" "Yes, sir," replied. She was young but sharp. She had figured out what was happening before most of the crew. "Their coordination is breaking down. It's subtle, but it's there." "The silence is spreading," said. He wasn't asking, he was stating a fact. On Earth, Ambassador sat in a small garden tending to flowers. She hadn't spoken to anyone from the Council in 3 weeks. She had no plans to speak to them anytime soon. Around her, Earth was quiet in a way it had never been before. No radio signals, no television broadcasts, no satellite chatter, just billions of people living their lives, all maintaining the same mental discipline, all contributing to the field that Dr. Sora had discovered. Touched a flower petal. It was soft and delicate. She thought about power, real power. The Council had ships and weapons and the strength of 12 species. They thought that made them powerful. But they didn't understand humans. They didn't understand what it took to survive on Earth. Earth with its earthquakes and tsunamis and hurricanes. Earth with its ice ages and volcanic eruptions. Earth with its predators and diseases and endless challenges. Humans had survived because they could adapt to anything, even silence, especially silence. The Council had declared war with words and threats and shows of force. Humans had answered with the one thing the Council couldn't fight: nothing. Back on New Haven, Governor closed his vegetable stand as the sun set. Around him, Council soldiers stood at their posts, looking lost and confused. One soldier was sitting on the ground, staring at his hands as if he didn't recognize them. Walked past them, heading home. He didn't look at them. None of the humans did. In the darkness, with only candles and small fires for light, the city felt ancient, peaceful. The Council soldiers with their advanced weapons and armor looked out of place. They looked like they didn't belong. Which was exactly the point. As reached his home, he allowed himself a small smile. The Council had come expecting to find humans cowering in fear or rising up in defiant rage. They had found neither. They had found something much worse. They had found a species that could simply choose not to acknowledge them. A species that could live in darkness and silence and still thrive. a species that could turn absence into a weapon. The silence was spreading, and the council was beginning to feel what it meant to shout into the void and hear nothing back. Not a word, not a sound, not even an echo. Just endless, patient, terrible silence. 6 weeks after the council's ultimatum, Commander sat alone in his quarters on New Haven. His hands were shaking. He tried to remember the last time he had felt certain about anything. The memory wouldn't come. Outside his window, the human city continued its quiet existence. People walked through streets lit by candles and small fires. They went to work. They raised their children. They lived. And not once, not ever, did they acknowledge that his soldiers existed. Tried to write a report to the council. He stared at the blank screen. What could he say? That his soldiers were deserting. That 3 had simply walked away from their posts and disappeared into the human city. That another had been found sitting in a corner, repeating, "I don't exist," over and over. How could he explain that an army of trained warriors was being defeated by people who refused to fight? His communication device buzzed. Another commander stationed on a different colony. "We need to talk, privately." "Agreed," replied. "What's happening?" "My science officer ran tests. The humans are emitting some kind of field. It's not energy. It's not radiation. It's something to do with consciousness itself. When large numbers of humans maintain absolute mental discipline, they create interference patterns that affect our neural pathways." Felt a cold fear settle in his chest. "Are you saying they're weaponizing their own minds?" "I'm saying they're all thinking in perfect synchronization, and somehow that's making us unable to think clearly. My crew can't maintain focus. We're making mistakes. Yesterday, we almost had a core breach because 3 technicians forgot basic safety procedures. Can we counter it?" A long pause. "I don't know. I'm not even sure the council will believe us. How do you report that humans are defeating us by being silent?" After the call ended, stood and walked to his window. Below, he saw a human woman lighting a candle outside her home. She was young, maybe's age if humans, and aged the same way. She moved with calm purpose, as if this was the most natural thing in the world, as if his fleet of warships didn't exist. For the first time in his military career, felt truly helpless. On Earth, in the hidden facility, Dr. Sora was explaining the science to a group of military commanders. "Consciousness creates measurable quantum effects," she said, pointing to a screen filled with complex equations. "We've known this for decades, but what we discovered is that when billions of conscious minds all achieve the same state simultaneously, the effect multiplies exponentially." "How does it work?" one commander asked. "Think of it like this," Dr. Sora said. "Every conscious thought creates tiny ripples in quantum fields. Usually these ripples cancel each other out because everyone thinks differently. But if everyone achieves the same mental state, the ripples align. They reinforce each other. They create waves. And these waves affect the council species. Yes, their neural structures are similar enough to ours that they're vulnerable. The field doesn't hurt them physically. It just makes it harder for them to think clearly, to maintain focus, to coordinate. It's like trying to remember a dream that keeps slipping away." Colonel spoke up, "And we can do this because humans evolved on Earth," Dr. Sora said simply. "Our world forced us to adapt to extreme conditions. We learned to meditate, to control our thoughts, to maintain discipline in chaos. Other species never needed to develop these abilities. They evolved on easier worlds." An admiral looked skeptical. "You're telling me that meditation is defeating a galactic military force?" "I'm telling you that billions of humans meditating in perfect synchronization is creating a null field that makes traditional warfare impossible," Dr. Sora corrected. "The Council came prepared for battles and weapons. They didn't come prepared for us to simply refuse to participate in their war." Meanwhile, Merchant had completed his latest delivery route. His ship, the Morning Star, docked at a council trade station for resupply. Council officials inspected his cargo manifest. Everything looked normal. They let him pass. What they didn't see were the hundreds of tiny resonance network nodes now floating in space around their station. These nodes did nothing by themselves. They simply waited, dormant, invisible to standard scans. But once activated, they would amplify the null field. They would turn the silence from a regional effect into a weapon that could reach across star systems. Smiled politely at the council official who checked his papers. The official looked tired. His eyes had trouble focusing. He waved through without the usual detailed questions. The field was already starting to affect them, realized, and they still had no idea what was happening. On New Haven, Governor watched as more council soldiers abandoned their posts. They didn't desert officially. They simply stopped following orders. They would stand at their positions, but their minds were elsewhere. Some had started talking to themselves. Others just stared into space. The human population continued ignoring them. Children played in the streets, careful to walk around the soldiers as if they were lamp posts or trees. Adults went to work, their paths never acknowledging the armed warriors standing on corners. One council soldier stopped on the street. "Please," the soldier said. His voice was desperate. "Please just acknowledge me, just look at me. Say something, anything." His eyes passed over the soldier as if he were transparent. Continued walking, his face peaceful and calm. The soldier fell to his knees. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm real, I exist." But no one answered. No one looked. The silence was complete. In orbit above New Haven, Council warships were having their own problems. Engineer, a young human woman working on a mining station nearby, watched through her telescope as one of the ships tried to perform a simple docking maneuver. The ship moved clumsily, overcompensated, had to try again. Simple procedures were taking 3 times as long as they should. Had helped design the resonance network. She understood what was happening. The ship's crews were affected by the null field. They could still function, but not well. Everything took more effort. Everything took more time. Mistakes happened. Small errors accumulated. How long, she wondered, before those small errors became catastrophic failures? Light years away, Captain received a coded message from Earth Command. It was time for the next phase. The Silent Echo and other stealth ships like it had been mapping Council positions for months. Now they received new orders. All ships, transmitted on a frequency only human vessels could detect. Begin deployment. The stealth ships moved through Council space like ghosts. They had been there all along, undetected. Now they deployed their own resonance network nodes. Within days, every major Council military installation had nodes floating nearby in space. The network was nearly complete. Soon, Dr. Sara would be able to activate it. And when she did, the null field wouldn't just affect soldiers on human colonies. It would reach into the heart of Council space itself. On the Council station, panic was setting in. Reports were flooding in from every occupied colony. Soldiers were breaking down. Ships were malfunctioning. Coordination between fleets was becoming impossible. And still the humans said nothing, did nothing, just continued their silent existence. Counselor addressed the assembly. "We need to face facts. Whatever the humans are doing, it's working. Our forces are incapable of maintaining the occupation." "They're doing nothing," shouted. "How can nothing defeat us?" "Because we don't know how to fight nothing," replied. "We know how to fight enemies. We know how to win wars. But how do you wage war against people who refuse to acknowledge the war exists? We have superior technology, superior numbers." "And none of it matters," said quietly. "Our soldiers can't think clearly in human space. Our ships make mistakes. Our coordination is breaking down, and the humans just keep being silent. They're not fighting us. They're not even resisting us. They're just ignoring us. And somehow that's more devastating than any weapon." Had no response. For the first time since the occupation began, he felt the terrible weight of uncertainty. In her garden on Earth, Ambassador pruned a small tree. Her movements were slow and deliberate, meditative. She was contributing to the field just like every other human. Billions of minds, all in the same state of calm focus, all creating ripples that aligned into waves. She thought about the council. They had expected humans to react with fear or anger. They had expected conventional responses to conventional threats. They didn't understand that humans had learned something important from living on Earth. Sometimes the best way to survive a storm is not to fight it. Sometimes you just have to be still and let it pass over you. And if you can remain still while your enemy exhausts themselves, then you win without ever raising a weapon. The Council had brought war, humans had brought patience, and patience knew always wins in the end. On New Haven, as the sun set, the Council soldiers looked at each other with growing fear. They were trained warriors. They had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that didn't fight, an enemy that didn't even acknowledge them. In the darkness, lit only by candles, the human city looked ancient and peaceful. And somewhere in that darkness, billions of humans maintained their perfect silence, their perfect discipline, their perfect synchronization. The Void was staring back at the Council, and the Void was winning. 6 months. The Council had given humans 30 days to surrender. 6 months later, the Council's military was falling apart. Commander sent his final report from New Haven before abandoning his post. His hands barely worked as he typed. Council leadership, I must report complete operational failure. 70% of my soldiers have deserted or become non-functional. The remaining 30% show severe psychological trauma. We cannot maintain this position. We cannot maintain any position in human space. I am withdrawing my forces immediately. He didn't wait for approval. He knew it wouldn't come. Would order him to stay, but wasn't here. Wasn't feeling what it was like to slowly lose his grip on reality. As ships lifted off from New Haven, the humans below continued their daily lives. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. They simply watched the ships leave with the same peaceful expression they had worn for 6 months. Then they went back to work. On the Council station, emergency sessions were happening every day now, but something strange was occurring. The counselors themselves were starting to have trouble thinking clearly. Debate would lose focus. Decisions would be made and then forgotten. Meeting records contradicted each other. Counselor finally understood why. The human merchant ships, he said suddenly, they've been traveling through our space for months. What were they really doing? A technician checked the logs. His face went pale. Sir, I'm detecting unusual quantum signatures throughout the station. They're similar to the readings we're getting from human space. They ceded our territory, said with dawning horror. While we were occupying their colonies, they were planting devices in our space. The silence isn't just affecting our soldiers anymore. It's affecting all of us. Find these devices, remove them, ordered. We can't, sir. They're too small, too numerous. And even if we found them all, the damage is done. Our entire communication network is compromised. Our military coordination is breaking down. Half our fleets can't even contact each other anymore. Slammed his claw on the table. Then we use our ultimate weapon. We destroy there. If we cannot occupy them, we will eliminate them. No, a quiet voice said. Everyone turned. It was Counselor, a member who rarely spoke. She was from a species that resembled Earth's dolphins but breathed air and floated in hover fields. No, repeated dangerously. If we destroy Earth, we prove that we are monsters, said. And more importantly, it won't stop what they've done. The field exists now. The network is deployed. Even if every human died tomorrow, we cannot undo what they've accomplished. We can only choose how to move forward. Before could respond, every screen in the council chamber activated at once. Admiral appeared. He stood on the bridge of the Earthborn, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked tired but calm. This was the first time any human had spoken in 6 months. "Members of the Galactic Council," said. His voice was quiet but clear. "You declared war, we declared peace. You have now learned which is more powerful. Stood up, you dare." "Sit down," said, not shouting, not threatening, just stating a fact. "You're going to want to sit down for this." Something in his tone made Sit. "For 6 months you have experienced what we call the null field," continued. "It is not a weapon in the traditional sense. It is simply what happens when billions of humans achieve perfect mental synchronization. We're not attacking you. We're just being silent together. But that silence has shown you something important." "What?" asked. "That you cannot make war on a species that refuses to participate in war. You brought soldiers. We brought patience. You brought weapons. We brought meditation. You tried to occupy our worlds. We simply waited for you to realize that occupation is impossible when the people being occupied act like you don't exist." Counselor spoke up. "What do you want? Surely you didn't do all this without purpose." Nodded. "Ambassador will join you shortly, but first I want to show you something." The screen split. On one side, on the other, a star map showing Council space. Red dots appeared, thousands of them. Each dot was a resonance network node. "These devices are now active throughout your territory," explained. "Each one can amplify the null field. Right now, they're operating at minimum power, just enough to cause coordination problems and communication delays. But if we increase the power—" He pressed a button. The red dots pulsed. In the council chamber, every counselor suddenly felt it, a wave of absolute silence that passed through their minds. For just 3 seconds they couldn't think, couldn't remember who they were, couldn't even remember that they existed. Then it passed. The counselors sat gasping. What they had felt was nothing compared to what the soldiers on human worlds had experienced for months, but even 3 seconds was terrifying. "That was 5% power," said. "We could increase it to 100%. If we did that across your entire territory, your civilization would stop functioning. Not destroyed, not killed, just unable to think clearly enough to maintain your technology, your government, your society." "You would hold us hostage?" asked. "No," a new voice said. Ambassador appeared on screen. She looked the same as she had 6 months ago when she walked out of the council chamber. Calm, peaceful, certain. "We're offering you a choice," said. "You came to us with threats and demands. You expected us to either surrender or fight. We did neither. Now you understand that humans don't fit into your categories. We can't be bullied. We can't be conquered. But we also don't want to conquer you." "Then what do you want?" Counselor asked. "Partnership," said simply. "Equal partnership. We want a place in the galactic community, not as servants, not as inferiors, not as conquerors, just as equals." "You're using that field to force us to accept you," said bitterly. "No," corrected. "We're using the field to show you that you have no choice but to accept us. There's a difference. You can keep trying to dominate us, but every time you try, we'll just go silent again. And you'll lose more coordination, more functionality, more sanity. Or you can accept that humans are part of this galaxy now and work with us instead of against us." Counselor floated forward. "What guarantee do we have that you won't use this power against us in the future?" "The same guarantee you gave us when you threatened to occupy Earth," replied. "None. You'll have to trust us. Just like we had to trust that you wouldn't simply destroy Earth when we refused to surrender. Trust is required for peace, Counselor. That's how it works." The council chamber was silent. Not the terrible silence that the null field created, just normal silence. The silence of people thinking. Finally, Counselor spoke. "I propose an emergency vote. Full recognition of human sovereignty. A seat on the council. Equal status in all galactic matters. All in favor." Raised a tentacle. "In favor." Slowly other counselors raised hands, tentacles, wings, some with relief, some with resignation, some with anger. Was the last he stared at with barely controlled fury. You tricked us, you manipulated us, you weaponized your own minds against us. No, said. We adapted, that's what humans do. You gave us an impossible situation, so we found an impossible solution. You tried to make us afraid. Instead, you taught us what we're truly capable of. If I vote against this, asked. Then the war continues, said. But you've seen what that war looks like. You've experienced what humans can do without firing a single shot. Do you really want to find out what happens if we increase the field to full power? Do you want your entire civilization to forget how to function? Was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he raised his claw. I vote in favor. The decision was unanimous. On Earth in the hidden facility, Dr. Sora began powering down the network, not turning it off. Never that. They would keep it active at low levels just in case, but the crisis was over. Colonel watched the power levels decrease. We did it, he said, sounding almost surprised. We actually did it. Of course we did, Dr. Sora replied. Humans always survive, that's what we do. On New Haven, the lights came back on. The power grid activated. The city blazed with electricity and technology once more. People cheered, not because they had won a war, but because they could stop being silent. They could talk and laugh and shout again. Governor stood in the central plaza where council soldiers had once occupied. They were gone now. The ships had left. The occupation had ended. He looked up at the sky and smiled. Captain received orders to return home. The silent echo would come out of hiding. It would no longer be a ghost ship. Lieutenant stood beside him as they prepared to leave council space. Sir, she asked, do you think the council learned their lesson? I think they learned that humans are not what they expected, replied. Whether that's enough remains to be seen. In her garden, Ambassador finally allowed herself to relax. The tension she had carried for 6 months released. Around her, Earth was becoming loud again. Radio signals, television broadcasts, satellite communications, the beautiful noise of humanity returning to normal. But she knew something important. Humans would never be exactly the same again. They had discovered something about themselves. They had learned that they could be perfectly unified when needed, that they could turn absence into presence, that they could win without fighting. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. And more importantly, humans would never look at themselves the same way. They had answered the Council's declaration of war with silence, and that silence had spoken louder than any words ever could. 1 year after the Council's withdrawal, Ambassador stood before the newly reformed Galactic Council. This time, she sat in a chair at the circle, not outside it, not as a visitor, as a member. The treaty had taken months to negotiate. The Council had wanted restrictions on the null field. Humans had wanted guarantees of sovereignty. In the end, both sides got what they needed. The resonance network would remain active but at minimal power. Humans would monitor it. The Council would have observers. Trust, but the first order of business, Counselor announced, is the formation of the Institute for Consciousness Studies. Dr. Sara of Earth has agreed to lead this initiative. Dr. Sara appeared on a screen from Earth. She looked the same as always, young and intense. Thank you, Counselor. The Institute will research the practical applications of consciousness field theory, but more importantly, we'll teach other species the mental techniques that humans developed. Meditation, focus, mental discipline. Why would you share this? Asked. He still sat on the council, though his influence had greatly diminished. It's your greatest advantage. Because the universe is better when everyone has the same tools, Dr. Sora replied. We didn't develop the null field to dominate others. We developed it to survive. Now that survival is assured, we'd rather have partners than subjects. In the audience, watching the proceedings, sat Admiral. He was retired now. His fleet had never fired a single shot in the war that wasn't a war, but somehow that made him more respected, not less. Other species were studying Earth's military tactics, how to win without fighting, how to use patience as a weapon. Felt proud and tired. He had spent 40 years preparing for conventional war. When the real war came, everything he had trained for became irrelevant. Yet somehow, Earth had still won. He wasn't sure what that meant for the future of warfare. Maybe it meant there wouldn't be a future for warfare at all. Beside him sat Captain and Lieutenant. The Silent Echo was now part of the official Earth Defense Fleet. No more hiding. No more pretending to be invisible, but sometimes missed those months of silent running when his ship had been a ghost in the darkness. "What are you thinking?" asked him quietly. "That we changed everything," replied. "But I'm not sure we understand what we changed into." On New Haven, Governor walked through the rebuilt Central Plaza. The city was thriving now. Humans and council species lived side by side. Some council soldiers who had been stationed here during the occupation had actually returned, not as occupiers, as immigrants. They wanted to understand the humans who had defeated them without fighting. One of them approached. It was the same soldier who had begged to acknowledge him all those months ago. The soldier looked healthier now, more present, more real. "Governor," the soldier said, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" asked. "For teaching me what it means to be truly seen. During the occupation, when you refused to look at me, I thought I was going mad, but later I understood. You weren't refusing to see me. You were refusing to see what the council had made me, an oppressor, an occupier. You were waiting to see the real me, the person I could choose to be." Smiled, "And who did you choose to be?" "Someone better," the soldier replied. Across the galaxy, the effects of the null field crisis were still being felt. Several council species had experienced internal reforms. Their people had been exposed to the silence through proximity to human space. That experience had changed them. They began questioning authority, demanding better governance. Some even started practicing meditation and mental discipline. A revolution had begun, not a violent one, a quiet one. Engineer was now working with the council's top scientists, helping them understand the resonance network. They wanted to build similar systems for communication, not warfare. The idea was that if consciousness could interfere, it could also harmonize. Ships from different species could coordinate better. Scientists could share thoughts directly. The null field technology might become the foundation for true galactic unity. But that was future work. For now, was content to explain the basics to species who had never considered that thoughts could be measured and manipulated. "Consciousness is just another force in the universe," she told a group of council engineers. "Like gravity or magnetism, humans didn't invent it, we just figured out how to use it. Now you can too." On Earth, Colonel was teaching council military officers about psychological warfare. But the lessons were different from traditional warfare training. He taught them about the power of perception, about how battles are won in the mind before they're won on the battlefield, about how the greatest victory is convincing your enemy that fighting is pointless. "War is obsolete," told his students, "not because we're more peaceful now, but because we found something more effective than violence. The null field proved that you can defeat an enemy without killing them, without even fighting them. You just make it impossible for them to fight you." One council officer asked, "But what if someone doesn't care about coordination or communication? What if they're willing to lose those things to hurt you?" Smiled, "Then you've already won, because someone willing to destroy themselves to hurt you isn't thinking rationally, and irrational enemies destroy themselves. You just have to wait." In her garden on Earth, Ambassador tended her flowers. She had spent a year traveling between Earth and the council station, negotiating, mediating, building bridges. Now she was home for a while. She needed to reconnect with the Earth, with the silence, with herself. A young woman approached. It was visiting during leave from the Silent Echo. Ambassador, may I ask you something? Of course. Do you think we did the right thing, using the null field? Some people say it was cruel, that we tortured Council soldiers by making them doubt their own existence. Was quiet for a moment. The Council came to destroy or enslave us. We responded by making them unable to do either. Was that cruel? Maybe, but it was also merciful. We could have built weapons that killed them. Instead, we built a weapon that made killing unnecessary. Which is more cruel, to end someone's life or to make them question it? I'm not sure there's an easy answer, said. There isn't, agreed. That's why we must always question what we do. The null field is power, great power, and power without wisdom is dangerous. That's why we're sharing it. That's why we're teaching others. Because a weapon everyone has is not a weapon at all. It's just a tool. Back on the council station, the day's session was ending. The members were preparing to leave. Counselor approached. I wanted to tell you something, said. When you walked out of this chamber a year ago, I thought you were making a terrible mistake. I thought humans would be crushed. And now I think you were the only one making the right choice. You refused to play our game. You changed the rules entirely. And you did it in a way that left everyone alive to see the new galaxy you created. I didn't create it alone, replied. 12 billion humans created it. Every single one of them maintaining discipline for 6 months. That's not the work of one person. That's the work of a species that knows how to survive together. Overheard this, he approached, his movements stiff. Do you feel proud, forcing the council to accept you? No, said honestly. I feel relieved. I feel grateful that we found a way to coexist. I feel hopeful about the future. But pride? No, we did what we had to do, just like you did what you thought you had to do. The difference is that we were willing to find a third option. Was silent. Then grudgingly he said, you have taught the galaxy something valuable, whether we wanted to learn it or not. As the council members departed, stood alone in the chamber, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. The ultimatum, the silence, the occupation, the revelation, the treaty. Humans had proven something important. They had proven that Earth's harsh conditions had given them abilities other species lacked. The ability to endure, to adapt, to maintain discipline in impossible situations, to find solutions where others saw only problems. But more than that, humans had proven they could use power wisely. They had the ability to silence the entire council, to make galactic civilization collapse into chaos, but they chose not to. They chose partnership instead. That choice, believed, was what would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Not their strength, not their technology, not even their cleverness, but their willingness to use power to build rather than destroy. On Earth, people were celebrating, not the end of a war, the beginning of a partnership. Ships from council species were arriving daily. Trade was opening up. Cultural exchanges were happening. Humans were learning about thousands of alien civilizations, and those civilizations were learning about humans. Dr. Sora watched the celebrations from her lab. The resonance network was still active, humming quietly in the background of galactic civilization. A reminder, a safeguard, a promise that if war ever threatened again, humans could choose silence once more. But she hoped they would never need to. She hoped that what they had built would last, that the new quiet, not enforced silence but chosen peace, would become the foundation of something better. Captain stood on the bridge of the silent Echo, looking at Earth through the. His ship would deploy again soon, but not to hide, not to watch enemies in silence, instead to explore, to find new worlds, to make contact with species that didn't even know the Council existed. Lieutenant joined him, ready for the next mission, sir. Always, said, but this time we'll be making noise. Admiral, now fully retired, sat in his home and wrote his memoirs. He titled them, The War We Won by Refusing to Fight. Publishers were already interested. The galaxy wanted to understand what had happened. how a species barely 2 centuries old had changed everything. But as wrote, he realized something. The story wasn't really about victory. It was about choice. The Council had chosen dominance. Humans had chosen something different. They had chosen to make dominance impossible. And in doing so, they had forced the entire galaxy to reconsider what power meant. Governor looked at the night sky from New Haven. Somewhere up there, Earth shone like a small blue star. Home. The world that had taught humans how to survive anything, even war, even peace. He thought about the Council soldier who had thanked him, about all the beings in the galaxy who were learning that there were alternatives to violence, that silence could speak louder than weapons, that patience could defeat armies. Maybe thought humans had given the galaxy something precious, not just a new way to fight, but a new way to not fight, a way to coexist without domination, to share the stars without conquest. The quiet revolution was spreading, and this time it wasn't a revolution of war, it was a revolution of peace. Ambassador returned to Earth for good. She had trained her replacement. Now she wanted to rest, to garden, to enjoy the world she had helped save without ever firing a shot. As she tended her flowers, she thought about the Galactic Council's ultimatum. They had declared war. Humans had answered with silence. And in that silence, they had spoken the truth that would reshape the galaxy. True power is not the ability to destroy. It is the ability to make destruction unnecessary. The war was over. The new quiet had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.